Hello. My name's Sephiroth, and in this video I'm going to be talking about doing phase modulation and frequency modulation in PhasePlant. This is really where PhasePlant shines. This is really, I think, where you can get the most out of PhasePlant. So, beyond being a great wavetable synth, it's a really great FM synth. So, first I shall open up some other FM synthesizers that you may be familiar with. So, let's check out good old Operator. So this is Operator. So this is actually a additive synth because it has this little harmonic window where you can draw in your harmonics. So you can do that in PhasePlant as well. And I think what confuses a lot of people are these different routing modes. And this is what we're going to be exploring in PhasePlant. So if you can see, the first routing mode here at the top is this oscillator modulates the frequency of this oscillator, which modulates the frequency of this oscillator, which modulates the frequency of this oscillator. And now, side note, I think that it's actually doing phase modulation, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So let's just start off with sine waves. So if they're all set to the same frequency and I start to give each one of these more gain, listen to the effect. So if all of them are cranked up and they're all playing the same octave, it sounds like that. Now I'll change the algorithm. So you get different results. And a lot of the movement comes from how you shape these volume envelopes. And how you tune the harmonics up and down. So it's a nice oscillator, or a nice synth. Now I'll show you FM8, which is the good old classic Skrillex synthesizer. And it looks like this. It's very convoluted and confusing looking. And you have 8, FM8. You have A, B, C, D, E, F. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different oscillators that can be doing different things, and the way you route them is in this matrix. Very, very cool, but very hard and confusing to use and also clunky. Now let me show you PhasePlant and how we can recreate a similar thing to what we're doing in Operator, but with a whole lot more flexibility and wavetables. So I'll make a wavetable, and this will be our carrier, and this will be our first modulator. Then we can duplicate this a few times. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can keep on duplicating these. You can have as many as you possibly want until you get to the limit. Let's see if there's even a limit. I think we reached the limit. So that's like how many oscillators you can have. I don't know what that is, like 10 oscillators or something crazy. 1, 2, that's probably 20 or 30. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5. Let's just do like an operator style first with 4. So let me bring back operator. So if we look at some of these routings, this first routing from top to bottom, the bottom one is the carrier in this first vertical algorithm right here. So this one's modulating this one, which is modulating this one, which is modulating the carrier. So you're only ever hearing this yellow square at the bottom. Whereas if you look at an algorithm like this, you're hearing both of these simultaneously, and they're both getting modulated by this one, which is modulating this one. So back in PhasePlant, you can do a lot of really cool different routings. You can get a lot more complex than in Operator. So let's start with LFOs as envelopes. So I'll take an LFO, put it on retrigger and one shot, and then let's just start with a simple envelope like this. And now we can start doing some FM. So there's two types of FM in PhasePlant. There's exponential and linear FM. The linear type is when you take the output of the operator and you modulate the semitone section right here. So that's linear, I believe. And then exponential is when you modulate the shift. I'm sorry, I might have that backwards. This sounds kind of more like exponential FM. See how it has a different response? So the shift is going to be a little easier to keep musical. And then the phase, which is like what you're doing when you're doing FM from B in Serum. It's actually phase modulation. It's this oscillator making this oscillator go back and forth this way instead of pitching it. And that sounds like this. So a different sound than this, but pretty similar. Because when you wiggle the phase, it does kind of mess with the pitch. So let's talk about FM routings. The most simple FM routing is to just modulate this one, which modulates this one, which modulates this one, which is the carrier. So we have like a cascading effect here. And then if we have 3 operators, we can have 3 envelopes. And we can use these envelopes to either control the volume of the oscillator, which will effectively control the amount, or we can take this and modulate the amount of FM here with this little star. And we can go and click this, and then we can adjust the amount. So let's do 100%. And this next one, we'll do the next one, 100%. And this last one, we'll do this. So now, so we can start changing these envelopes and get a different effect. I'm going to take a macro and just control the overall time of these envelopes, all by the same amount at first with this macro, just so that I have a time knob. And I'll call it time. Now we can go in and start changing these shapes. So maybe this one we can use as like a plucky shape. This one we can use as like a ramp up with a ramp down at the end, and this one maybe just like a linear situation. So we can now control the amount that we are modulating the amount by with these attenuators that are on the LFOs. So where the real trick comes in is when you start to tune these to different harmonics in the harmonic series. So let's start tuning these up. I'll tune this bottom one up a bunch. And now if we start to back off, on these little yellow circles here on the modulators, which represent the amount of FM being applied, it will maintain a higher level of like upper harmonics because it's basically offsetting the bottom of the modulation depth. So to get more movement into these patches, I've learned to slightly detune them, similar to how you would with a respace. So if I start to detune these, we'll get a little bit of nice wobble. And there's all these cool sweet spots within the detuning as soon as you start messing with the sentitones. There's all these cool sweet spots, so it's all about like kind of sweeping through and finding those sweet spots. So now I'll show you what happens when you start using other waveforms. So we have all the simple basic waveforms here in these default wavetables, so we can start experimenting with things like triangle, saw, and square / pulse wave. And as you move through, you're going to get a different character. So a lot of wacky sounds to be found. FM synthesis gets atonal real quick. So one thing I've learned is to mitigate that atonality. It helps for the final operator in the stack, if you're doing this linear cascading routing type effect. It helps to have that final one be a sine wave. So if you find a cool sweet spot like that, and then you quicken the attack of all these envelopes, you can get these cool kind of like percussive beginnings to the sound. Now here's a difference between phase modulating and FM. Listen to how the D note that I'm playing sounds good, but then when I move notes, it's like I get a different effect per note. So you can find like cool notes that work. So you can get some weird atonal stuff going on like that. So I'll show you the setup that I like to do a lot. So I like to do this setup where I'll use one wavetable to modulate the next. And then I'll use another wavetable that's on something really complex, like maybe some of these spectrals, like the crystal. And I can modulate this simple sine wave with the spectral one. So I could modulate the amount of that FM to the carrier and then back off slightly. So it helps to kind of have like a long LFO and then set it to unipolar and start to find those sweet spots in this complex wavetable. So I'll just set it to square and I'll just find a sweet spot to start out with. So that, depending on the wavetable you choose here, can work. It's not working right now, but a good method with these kind of tones is to just find a sweet spot and resample it. So that one's pretty nice. I think I'll sample that one. So I'll just create a sampling track and take the audio from PhasePlant, Control, click, and sample a little bit of the D note. So there's kind of a sweet spot. Now we could find a different one. So that one sounds pretty good. So you can see this is like a pretty cool way to create like a bunch of nice bass shots. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm using FM. FM is a lot less predictable than phase modulation, which is why I think phase modulation is much more popular, I guess. It's much more commonly used. So now let's do a little bit of phase modulation. So I'll do the same thing where I'll take this oscillator, modulate this one, but I'll do the phase. I have to arm the track here. I'll again map this LFO to control the amount by a little bit. And then I'll use this bottom one to modulate this next one. So see how it stays in tune? It still sounds different from a note-to-note basis, though. And you can see that is because I had this tuned to something that wasn't harmonically perfect. So as soon as I have both of them on a perfect harmonic, it stays in tune no matter what note I play. So now I can choose some different harmonics. And I can then modulate this wavetable without it getting all overly atonal. the sound when you go into that square and triangle. That's super gnarly. Let's modulate this one with another LFO set to a different speed. And if I have these two LFOs set to not retrigger, then every note when I play, it'll hit a little bit different. So you can see the phase modulation sounds pretty similar to the FM, but it's a bit gnarlier. It goes a bit higher. You can get a lot more highs with phase modulation than with regular FM. So I think that the phase modulation in a lot of cases makes more sense to use on playable patches where you want to play a melody. You know, and don't be afraid of these high harmonics, because they make for absolutely wonderful material once you start to filter it. Put a distortion. Can do cool stuff like this. So yeah, they're really great for filtering these sounds. So let's go back to FM now. And let me show you where it really does shine, because it's really great for these more atonal sounds where you might use them for effects or drums. So I'll get a couple sine waves and do some frequency modulation. Let's do a kind of a more interesting matrix here. So instead of just cascading, let's like take this one and modulate the shift on this one, and then take this one and modulate the shift on this one as well. And then let's take this one and modulate the shift on this one. And for this kind of process, I like to go ahead and use the macros to control the amount of modulation. I didn't want that to happen here. Let's do this. So have a macro for each modulation point there. So it's nice to have these up here, and then you can modulate these with envelopes if you want. Just nice to have those. If you want a little bit more high frequencies out of this, a trick is to turn the level up above 100%. It goes all the way to 200%. So you can turn the level up a bunch. So you can get a lot more nice highs. And notice how the frequency modulation, it sounds a lot less digital and a lot less abrasive. It sounds a lot squelchier and wetter. So if I wanted to make some like cool spacey sci-fi type effects, I could maybe do like some random modulators on those and some random modulators on the pitch, and then just see what happens. So let's just use these random modulators to do the pitch on all of these, and let's just see what happens. And I'm just doing this more or less at random, so then I'll also modulate some of these up here. And then maybe I'll have another random, and for this random, we'll use this random to modulate the attenuators on all of these other randoms. So I'll close this now and modulate, and then you have to remember to bring this down first. So bring it down and then modulate it. So now we're randomly adjusting the amount of all of those with a single modulator, so that'll kind of bring it all back together a little bit. I think these could all be unipolar instead of bipolar. So only going in one direction instead of having a center point and going equally in both directions. And then maybe we could also modulate the smoothness of these so that we kind of get a gradient of, and we'll make this one unipolar as well. So now we can get kind of a gradient of smooth to steppy, so that we get a little bit of that kind of like digital computer malfunctioniness. So some kind of cool generative glitch perks going on. We could play off that by adding an envelope to the pitch of all the oscillators at once by modulating the master tune. Maybe add like a distortion just to beef it up a bit. And then I could just record some of those. Oops, I don't think I'm sampling the right thing here. There we go. So, bunch of random perks. I'm sure these would sound cool stretched out, like, or pitched down, because they're so noisy you can barely hear them. Like they'd be good for hats or snare tops or reverse sounds. Let's try let's try reversing them and pitching them down and stretching them way out. Just for fun, let's hear how that kind of sounds. So that's pretty cool. There's all kinds of cool things you could do with those. I'll actually unwarp them so we just have them. Let's make some drums with FM synthesis. Making drums with FM synthesis is a little different than just your typical subtractive style drum synthesis. So we can start to experiment. The basic idea is you have like a percussive envelope that you can control the amount of frequency modulation by. So if I do this and then I set this to control this, and then I can also duplicate this. It's again nice to have a time knob. So if I put these on one shot, I can use this one to control the gain of the perk, and then maybe have that be shaped a little bit bigger. So that's kind of a nice little like wavefoldy sounding thing. If I start pitching this oscillator around, we get different results. I like finding those inharmonic frequencies. I feel like they sound really woody or metallic depending on what you're doing. Let's do another one. And for this one, we'll create another envelope so we can use a different envelope to control this one's amount. And then a bit of a pitch envelope. I'll just do it to... So if you modulate the pitch of all of them at once, it sounds like this. So I'll modulate the pitch all at once. Or we can leave the pitch of the fundamental or the carrier normal and just modulate the pitch of these two modulators by varying amounts. So that's pretty nice. It has that nice thick sound to it. go through a little distortion. So that sounds pretty metallic. You can give it a little release on the actual envelope. And now if we change the pitch of these, we're going to get different timbres. So I really like, those inharmonic timbres just sound so physical to me. Some other things you can do is like cross feedback. So we could take the output of this carrier and then again modulate the frequency of this one, and you get some really nice noise this way. And you get a lot more noise if you modulate the phase. Could maybe have a separate pitch envelope for the carrier. I'm going to take away that phase modulation. We could maybe modulate some more stuff like this. So some kind of cool stuff there. That's pretty nice right there. I'll sample that. So I'm just playing different keys on the keyboard because remember, you get a different timbre for every key on the keyboard with this kind of frequency modulation. So those are kind of like some nice snare layers. All right, so I'll show you one more kind of patch. So for this one, we'll try to get some like yaw-yaws going. So I'll just start with one operator. And we'll just do an LFO to the frequency of this one and leave this one stable, and then have this one modulate the frequency. And then maybe another LFO, slightly different speed, modulate the pitch of this top one. So like some really crazy noise there. You get a different kind of effect if you do kind of a lasery or bubbly shape. So we could do unipolar on these and just see how this sounds. So once you start modulating the modulators, that's where like a lot of the fun is to be had. So we could modulate the speed of this one to go from fast to slow, and then this one to go from slow to fast. So we get like a kind of a reverse. That's a pretty cool sound. Could resample that. So some kind of fun like video game samples. So yeah, when you start going atonal with it and just experimenting and doing random stuff with the frequency modulation, that's where I find you can get a lot of really cool sounds. I'll just return to bass before I end this video, just to show you that you shouldn't overlook the frequency modulation for bass. It's just a matter of finding those sweet spots and then bouncing it out. So I'll pick a note on my keyboard, say it's like a low D. and start to modulate the frequency. Like, that's a pretty unique bass sound. If I just put an envelope on that and I have it come down to like almost 0 and I control the amount of the frequency modulation. Like, that's a nice like atonal beginning to a pretty nice tonal sound. So I could like I could just resample that. And then I have like a cool bass sound. Could fade it. It's good for those kind of drummy bass sounds. And then I really like just finding those kind of timbres. So now if I play different notes, it's really hit or miss. So what I can do is just sample the good notes. Yeah, that was pretty much the only good note. So yeah, that's how I treat that. And then obviously this is not going to sound like a D, probably. Let's see. If I play a D, and then I listen to this note, yeah, it sounds flat by like half a semitone or maybe a whole semitone. So the deal with these, how I would deal with this is I would get a sampler with an operator in an instrument rack, and I just plop this in the sampler. And then if I play up high on the keyboard, I get it in the right octave and in the right note, which was detuned up 26 centitones, and then using the root note to find that right octave and note. And then I can just mute that operator. So then it does track once you resample it. And then you can also make like chords. You can play it polyphonically. And you can like filter it because it sounds super gnarly. So that's how I do those. But yeah, just some cool things about using FM, PM, when and why to use each one and their strong suits. Play around with it. PhasePlant is really a great tool for it. Remember with the FM, trying to find those sweet spots using the tuning. So let me just show you again in this patch. Let's see, is this the patch? Yeah, so let me show you how to find a sweet spot. Basically, I just use this shift, which is the coarse tuning. I try to get close, and then I go over here to the semi and centitune, and I can use this centitune to do really delicate fine tuning to find that sweet spot. And then I can use resampling to sample that. And then I have another sample. So these are super complex waves, and you're going to lose sub. That's another thing you should know about making basses this way. you're almost always going to lose the sub. So what makes a lot of sense is to layer it up with a sub. So I would take a sampler or whatever and a sub. Here's my sampler sub. And then I can put this bass that I just made. Is this the one? Yeah. So I put this in here and then again, pitch it up a couple octaves. And then I'm just going to use the root. So that sounds pretty good. And then I can pitch it down. And then I can use a filter. I can use the filter in here. I can use the loop forwards mode so we can get a nice loop going, so we can have nice long sustained notes. And it's always a good idea to turn this interpolation up to the best so that when you're pitching around samples, it doesn't sound whack. Let's try pitching this top bass down an octave. Let's see how that sounds. Like poo-poo. So yeah, it sounds good to distort these together. That way you get a little intermodulation distortion. And it also sounds good to filter this with this high pass. So if I wanted to write like a little bass line, I could take this and just make like a MIDI clip, draw something in. And then I'll just record automate. And then it can be cool to automate the volume of the sub chain as well. So a little bit of like Neurobass FM hybrid, cool stuff. And the reason why I'm able to automate the volume and filter the sub out here like this with this high pass and all this, the reason why it still sounds so full is because I'm sending it into a bunch of clipping. So as soon as I'm clipping this signal, I start to automate the frequency cutoffs and the gain going into the distortion, and all that does is create timbral change. But if you look, the sub is more or less consistent. Like it's a pretty flat, consistent, textural square wave like any bass, but it has a lot of nice movement in it. Like there are places where it cuts out the sub, and there are places where it's mostly noise, but you can see there's this nice clean sub, and that's coming from having that separate sub in there and then squishing them together into the distortion to create that intermodulation distortion neuro bass, kind of like noisy bass type effect. And I, especially lately, I just have been really enjoying those kind of basses. Something that is really useful for these kind of basses is like a dynamic EQing. So like right up here, it could be nice to just have a bit of dynamic EQ, just so that when that screech happens, it doesn't pierce you. And same with these low mids. It can be nice to have a little dynamic EQ on those just to control the mud. And it can also be nice to kind of boost that sub fundamental a little bit with another bit of dynamic EQ so that when that sub hits, it really hits. And sometimes it's nice to like EQ out the sub below like 20 hertz. But if you're gonna do that, it's important a lot of times to use like a linear phase, because if you don't, you get a little bit of weird, a weird kind of distortion from it. Yeah, so if you make basses like that, you can like do that kind of automation in the timeline and try to get it to sit right with the drums. That's like a really cool way to do it. And then another way to do it is to do it how I'm doing it, where you're like in a different session and you just make some of these basses, and then there's parts that sound better than other parts, and you can kind of just pick and choose. And if you have these kind of basses, they work really well in a sampler. So now I can go back into a sampler and just kind of draw a C3. And then what sounds really nice to these is to do like some pitch bending. So I could go either to the pitch bend range and set it to 24 and 24, and then go in here and modulate the pitch bend, or you can go to the transpose and right click and show modulation after having clicked on the right MIDI clip that you want to modulate within. And then if you modulate the transpose, you don't run into that problem where like the tuning gets stuck up if you don't meticulously put dots at the end here. Like you don't have to do that when you're just drawing modulation on the transposition. It's a different thing. So then you can like, it's a little bit more exact too, like it snaps to the semitone, which is kind of nice sometimes. Sometimes it's not nice. So that's like a really fun way. If you make like some of these basses that are a bit longer, then you can like start duplicating samplers, and it's just a really quick way to write bass lines, because you can have a sample in here and then the same sample in here, and you have the same MIDI and all this set up already, and you can duplicate MIDI around with the modulation inside the MIDI roll, and then you can change the start point. Like starting it there sounds way cooler. You can also do cool loops, like it might be cool to loop it there. So yeah, it's just kind of a side note on Nero bass there at the end. But yeah, if you like this video, like and subscribe. You know what to do. Find my stuff everywhere, same name everywhere. Yeah, if you want some samples that I've been making, Patreon's the way to go. $6 gets you thousands of samples. And yeah, until next time, I'm Sephiros. Big up and peace.